Welcome to the AI for You Cafe for live presentations around AI and many other themes. Today's presentation is themed George Boole, born 1815 and lived until 1864, the father of computing. The speaker is, I'm delighted to present, Cronan O'Dowdlin. And he will soon introduce himself, but as always, we start slowly in this cafe. My name is Carmen McWilliams, and I'm the moderator and organizer. We are giving everybody the chance to enter the cafe. I'm the director of the company Grassroots Arts and partner in the European AI for You project. Please take notice that the session will be recorded. The recording you will find later on the AI for You YouTube and Go to Stage channel if Cronan gives permission to publish it. No confidential information shall be shared in this cafe session. All speakers express their personal views and opinions. This is not necessarily the official AI for You project opinion. And for you who are maybe the first time in this cafe, what is this cafe? The Web Cafe offers a series of live web sessions, and the cafe is an online forum to gain insight into the European AI scene. And not everybody has to be artificial intelligence, can be also from computing, from history, and today from UCC history. Participants get the chance to share knowledge and experiences and meet stakeholders from various areas of AI and research and applications. Please feel free to promote this cafe to your friends if you wish. So now we're coming to the highlight. I am delighted to present you Cronan O'Dowdlin, Head of Research Collections, University College Cork in Ireland. Cronan gave me a personal tour last year through the historical treasures of the UCC library during one of our AI for You project meetings in 2019. He will present to us the story of the field of computing, and you, all the participants, I welcome you. Thank you that you're today here. Please feel free to ask questions to Cronan. This is interactive. There will be a possibility after Cronan's presentation that I read your questions to Cronan. He is with us until 4 o'clock, so you can answer them. So use the text chat on the right side, type in your questions, I will see them and I will read them. So now I'll shortly introduce Cronan. Cronan O'Dowdlin is the Head of Research Collections, University College Cork, Ireland. He has been a member of UCC Library Senior Management Team since 2005, working closely with the Director of Library Services and the Director of Information Services, and was part of the team that delivered a 27 million PRTLI funded redevelopment of the UCC Library, including the transformation of special collections and archives. Cronan's core responsibilities are in leading the strategic development, organization, and management of collection services, including library budget. He also supports the Director of Information Services and the Development Office with alumni and external relations, including fundraising. He is a recent alumni of the LIBER Emerging Leaders Program, and has also represented UCC Library on a number of national committees. So again, welcome Cronan. Hi, great you're with us.
Hi, Carmen.
Hi. Thank you. You will present to us. I will now give you the moderator role. That means you then can share your screen with us. Wait a second, I will do it now. Cronan now you have it. So now you're free to say whatever you like and present whatever you like.
Well, before I share my screen, I'd just like to say thank you very much to Carmen and to the AI for EU project for inviting me to speak to this wonderful audience today. It's a real privilege. I should say, first of all, I'm a librarian not a mathematician or a computer scientist. So I'm sure most of you out there will know an awful lot more about George Boole than I do. And what I'm going to speak to you today about is basically about the Boole collection in UCC and University College Cork. And the collection in Cork, most of it was acquired in 1983, and it's mostly his personal papers. So it gives another insight to Boole outside of his academic work, and that's the element that I find very, very interesting, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about. Some of the elements will include his...
there's some connection problem.
Okay.
One moment, Krona. One moment.
Okay.
Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Do you? Okay, yeah. Now we hear you again. I hear you. Perfect. So.
Okay, so I'm basically going to talk a little bit about his social connections. His observations, he made a lot of observations about Ireland. Bear in mind, he came to Ireland in the middle of the 19th century. So quite a difficult period in Irish history. And also, I think possibly the most inspiring element of him for me is his influence as an educator and his relationship with his students. So those are the sort of three themes that I've kind of picked up from the collection in UCC. So I'm now going to switch over to my screen and begin my presentation proper.
I will switch off my camera so you have better bandwidth. So I'm there, but I switch off my camera. See you.
Okay. So bearing in mind that we're an international audience here, I thought I'd begin by just giving people a sense of where Cork is in Ireland. It's right at the southern tip of the country, about 2 hours from Dublin. We have our own airport, of course, and we get lots of visitors. Lots of people come to Cork as part of what's called the Wild Atlantic Way, a trip that people take along the western seaboard there. So we get lots of visitors, and we want to welcome more visitors to Cork. So that's where we're located. The campus itself, the university campus, we're very fortunate. It's very beautiful. This building is the old quad, and it's actually the building that George Boole himself would have recognized. The old library was through the middle door in the quad, and Boole would have been a frequent attender at the library. In fact, he was the first chair of the library committee, and that's one of the reasons why the university or the library has such a close connection with him. In terms of university communities, we're a community of about 26,000 between staff and students. We're a research-intensive university, and we have about 16% of our student body are international. And we also have a very heavy emphasis on the environment, and we were the first green campus worldwide in 2010, and we maintain a very high concentration on green energy and sustainability within the university. UCC Library the main library was originally built in 1983 and houses, it was named for George Boole in 1983, and of course houses the Boole collection. The library was extended in 2007, 2008, and as you can see from the photograph there, we're pretty much a 24/7 university library. We have a footfall of about 7,000 students and readers every day, so it's quite a busy place. In terms of collections, as you might expect, we collect materials relating, I suppose, broadly to Irish studies. The image that you see there is a manuscript fragment from the 12th century. It's actually from Regensburg in Germany, the Schottenkloster monastery there, which was established actually by Irish monks from the Munster region, from the Cork region. So it's very important to us. We also collect modern manuscripts, and you have in front of you there what's called the Great Book of Ireland, a modern vellum manuscript, which was a collaborative project of almost 260 poets and artists. And the little piece of writing on the left-hand side that you see there is actually the last written words of Samuel Beckett, the Irish writer. It's a little meditation on his impending death, we think. So it's actually written in his own hand, and that's in the library collections. And we also collect modern collections. Modern photography is a current theme of collecting, and is a well-known image of Samuel Beckett taken by the photographer John Minahan, whose collection is also with us. So we collect from the 12th to the 21st century, and the wonderful Boole papers are a very important part of that. So who was George Boole? George Boole is a lot of things to different communities and different disciplines in Cork and in the Munster region. First of all, obviously, he was the eminent and distinguished academic, the Fellow of the Royal Society. He was also a Victorian English gentleman in Ireland, I suppose almost like an outsider, observing Ireland at a very important point in history. And thirdly, and perhaps a little bit peculiarly, he's sometimes viewed as the inspiration behind Sherlock Holmes's adversary Moriarty in the Arthur Conan Doyle stories. So he has lots of things to lots of people, but I suppose primarily in UCC, he's a very inspirational figure and has been for a number of decades. His connection with the university has stimulated interest in the study of mathematics and ICT at UCC for many decades. It has also enabled us to strengthen our partnerships with the business community and with the ICT sector, which is heavily based in the Cork region. Many of our graduates have gone on to work internationally, and many of them have also come back with businesses and as part of international businesses to the local region, bringing much welcome employment. He's also an inspiring figure to school teachers, pupils, and parents. We have a very energetic visitor program in our visitor centre, which incorporates programs for primary schools and secondary schools, and it's very much based around Boole and his connection with the university. And also, it gives us an opportunity to explore the wider impact of research at UCC, because clearly Boole's thinking and the influence of Boole stretches far beyond mathematics and computing. It opens up opportunities for lots of different disciplines, as broad as music, philosophy, and the biosciences. And we've really made advantage of that connection to promote our research endeavours internationally. Back in 2015, we had a bicentenary celebration for George Boole. And we have a website, georgeboole.com, which I would really encourage you to go and have a look at. I'm not going to click into it now, but we have a series of legacy interviews there, which 16 legacy interviews with eminent computer scientists, mathematicians, that give a really moving story of the impact that Boole had on their academic life, their academic work, and how he influenced them through their careers. There's 16 interviews there, and I'd really recommend going and click into those interviews. They're fantastic. And I suppose one of the great advantages as we start to delve into the collection itself, the great advantages that I have and great privileges that I have as a librarian is that when IT specialists or computer scientists or mathematicians come in to view the Boole papers, I really have a unique opportunity to connect them with a piece of the history of their discipline and place their career and their career path in a I suppose a greater scheme of things. And that really does in many occasions become quite an emotional engagement for those people. So it's a really fortunate thing to have the collection in UCC. The item that you see in front of you is a little book of testimonials that Boole brought together, got printed and submitted when he was applying for the post of Professor of Mathematics at UCC, or Queen's College Cork as it was then, back in the 1940s. So maybe I should say a little bit about Boole's early background. He came from relatively a poor background. His father was a shoemaker and his mother was a maid. His father also had an interest in making optical instruments, and Boole seems to have helped him with some of these little tasks, scientific tasks. And Boole was obviously a little bit of a prodigy. His father encouraged him, but he made great progress himself in terms of teaching himself mathematics, teaching himself languages, and he soon became a little bit of, I suppose, a prodigy within the local community in Lincoln, and attracted some mentors and support. By the age of 16, he was actually teaching in the local schools and was the main breadwinner for the family. And again, attracting attention and eventually support of people like Augustus de Morgan, whose testimonial is on the left-hand side here. And these are the people that brought him from outside the academic establishment into academia and gave him the opportunity to forge his career and pursue his love of mathematics and logic. The testimonial on the right-hand side is a testimonial from one of his students, and I think this is a really consistent part of the collection, the interaction of Boole with his students, and very close interaction and very intense interaction as well. They are very fond of him, and he is very fond of them, and very supportive. By 1841, Boole was publishing in the Cambridge Mathematical Journal, and by 1846, there was plans afoot to establish 3 colleges in Ireland. And Boole, at this stage, he had won the Royal Medal for Mathematics from the Royal Society, the first Royal Medal for Mathematics. He won that medal in 1844. So he was clearly intent on pursuing a career as a mathematical academic. And he made an application for one of the professorships of mathematics at one of these 3 new colleges. And this is the little book of testimonials that he submitted at that time. Now, clearly, Ireland in the 1840s was a very difficult place. We were in the midst of the Irish famine. So the opening of the colleges was postponed. But Boole still held on to his application. And towards the middle of 1849, he gets notice that his application is being considered. So I'm showing you here the first letter that I'm going to show. Is a very, very interesting letter. It's a letter to his sister Mary Ann. And if you think back, middle of the 19th century, a very conservative society, this letter is George Boole writing to his sister to ask for her opinion on whether he should accept an opportunity in Lincoln, a local opportunity as a headmaster of a local school, where there's a guaranteed income that he can provide for the wider Boole family, or whether he should take an opportunity to go to Ireland and accept one of these new professorships. And I quote, "I hear that the Board of Principals and Vice Principals has sent up to the Lord Lieutenant a list of about half a dozen names, out of which it remains for him to select the 3 professors of mathematics. I believe that your name is one of those returned, and that as regards qualifications, the board has recommended you in the strongest way." And I kind of think in the underlining in the strongest way, although Boole is quoting here, he is actually presenting his dilemma to his sister in a way that he hopes that she will suggest, yes, go and take the post in Ireland. And it's probable at this stage that a post in Ireland, I suppose, on the fringes of civility from the perspective of a British Victorian establishment, is possibly the only way he's going to get into a university environment. We then have in the collection a series of letters between Mary Ann and George, and it's actually, in this world of email, it's really quite astounding how frequent the correspondence is. So Boole has just arrived in Cork, and he writes these very descriptive letters of his surroundings and the people that he encounters back to his sister Mary Ann. And they really are quite special. So this is the first letter. And I'm just going to again read a little piece which describes his initial lodgings close to the college. I have arrived at length at the scene of my future labours. I have taken what I think will prove comfortable lodging close by the college. The situation and the prospects around are all that could be desired. The River Lee flows in front of us through a beautiful valley, the sides of which are covered with wood in many parts, an unusual sight in Ireland. And with suburban villas, Cork, so far as I have yet seen, is a very pleasant and indeed a rather fine city. And here you have the vista, the view that Boole would have seen, the River Lee on the left-hand side here over by the little red building. We think Boole's lodgings were somewhere on the hillside here. He would have walked across that little bridge in the distance over to Queen's College Cork, which is behind us, the trees here on the right-hand side. So things haven't changed that much. However, Boole goes on in his letter to describe the social circumstances that he's coming into. So this is 1849. We're at the tail end of the famine. So the country is still very much devastated by the potato blight. And he describes a very different state of affairs to what he's used to in Lincoln. Lincoln, his hometown in England, is quite an active little agricultural market town and quite prosperous. So there is plenty of food and life is quite reasonable for the times. So what he encounters in Ireland is very different. So he's describing here his journey from Dublin by train through the middle of the country to Cork. And he says, of the state of cultivation in Ireland, judging from what I yesterday saw while travelling from Dublin, it is impossible to speak in terms too sad. There is over the whole country an air of utter destitution and abandonment. For miles and miles you see nothing but fields overgrown with weeds. Scarcely a human being by the way, or a herd of cattle in the fields. And I think it's a very stark and a very important document, this, and many of the letters are similar in their descriptions of the hardship that is encountered by different parts of society in Cork at the time. So if you can imagine, the university is quite a well-to-do environment, but in parts of the city, things are very difficult. And obviously through the main body of the countryside, they're exceptionally difficult. One particular aspect of the correspondence is Boole's letters to his students. And I think this is, you know, when I mentioned Boole as an inspiration, as an educator, I think this is a really touching aspect and a really interesting aspect of the collection. He frequently mentions his students in his correspondence, and they're not just a means of income for him. By the way, he's sending his salary home to his family and living on the fees that he earns from teaching his students. So he's made very good relationships with the students that he teaches in Lincoln. Many of the classes that he gave in Lincoln actually were free, as well as managing, I suppose, paid for classes. But I'll read a little bit, and this is give you a sense of, I suppose, the connection that he had with the students in Lincoln. This is a letter to students in Lincoln, and also the difficulty of the break that he had to sort of make in leaving his hometown to come to Ireland. How delighted I shall be on my return to my native city if I learn that you have been good boys, steady to your labours, faithful and obedient to your teachers, kind and courteous to each other, obliging to all with whom you have to do. Remember well that by faithful, honourable conduct, you will promote your own happiness now and hereafter. Accept my best kind regards, your former teacher and affectionate friend. P.S. I should be proud to hear from any of you. And this sort of sense of equality and a sense of generosity to his students goes through all of his correspondence, and his generosity to other people as well. a little technical problem there, but just we're moving on to another little letter that he writes to his students. And again, he's describing the college. So he's describing the environment of the college. And he says, again to the students, he's describing the River Lee, and he says one of them, but tributaries of the River Lee beside the university. One of them flows immediately below the college, and there's a little cascade in the stream, the murmuring of which is very agreeable. There are many such on the Lee above Cork. Below the city, the Lee widens greatly, indeed becomes an arm of the sea. And here we have, I think, if I can, we have a contemporary image of Queen's College Cork, and you can see the little cascading stream there, and you can see also you can see the college in the background. I'm just going to come out of my presentation just for 1 second and just show you another little artifact that, if I can, that we have in the collection. And this is an artifact that we actually discovered in the collections a few years ago, and it's something we didn't know anything about. It's actually an mathematical examinations scrapbook that Boole kept in the college. And as you can see, it's heavily annotated. And he kept it over a number of years. And that came to light. It was possibly in some of the administrative collections, but it came to light just about a decade ago. So I know you will have some questions for me at the end of my presentation. So perhaps I may have some questions for you as well from some of these exam papers. Just 1 second, go back to my slide. So another interesting aspect of the correspondence between Boole and his sister Mary Ann is his observations of university life. And again, this goes back to the sense of Boole as not quite part of the establishment. He was a little bit of an outsider. He self-made man, self-taught, brought himself into a position to become part of the academic establishment, but still not wholly part of it. And he's observing in Cork, which, as he says, seems to be a very hospitable place, and entertainments are still given in style in Cork, I might add. But he's noticing the extravagance, particularly in the context of the difficulty that he sees in other parts of the city. And it doesn't really sit well with him. And this is something that you get time and time again in his correspondence. And in fact, on a number of occasions in college, Boole clashes with the establishment. He clashes with the president of the college and clashes with other people. And pretty much it's always in an effort to, from Boole's perspective, to make things more equitable or accessible for the students or for the staff. And he didn't see difference so much between people. He saw everybody as being, I suppose, of God's own children, as it were. He was a very religious man, and he was a very moral man also. And that really does come across in his correspondence. And so we have another very touching little letter. It's actually one of the last letters that we have that Boole wrote, and it's a letter to his eldest daughter. So obviously Boole was traveling quite a bit. He got married in 1855 to Mary Everest, who was the niece of George Everest of Mount Everest fame. And they had 5 children, 5 daughters, 5 remarkable daughters, I should say. And the oldest of those was Mary Ellen. Mary Ellen was a person who collated together all of the papers that we have with the intention of writing a biography. So we're very much indebted to Mary Ellen. So this is a little note that he sends to Mary Ellen whilst in London. And this is about 6 months before he died. So he's saying that she is the oldest. You are now 8 years old, and for each of the little ones, a kiss from me. So he's asking Mary Ellen to kiss each of the little sisters on his behalf. So quite a touching letter from father to a daughter. And I mentioned the sisters. And he had 5 daughters, and they really were quite remarkable people in their own right. We have here, just on the right-hand side, we have Mary Ellen, who was the oldest. And Mary Ellen married a mathematician, Charles Howard Hinton. We have Lucy here next from left to right. And Lucy was the first female professor of chemistry in the United Kingdom. Then we have Alicia, and Alicia wasn't an academic, but she was a mathematician in her own right. And as I understand it, she made significant contributions to 4D geometry. The fourth across is Ethel, and Ethel Lillian, and she's probably the most well-known. She's better known as Ethel Lillian Voynich, and she is, of course, the author of the novel The Gadfly. She married Wilfrid Voynich, an antiquarian book dealer who's well known for his connection with the Voynich manuscript, which is in Yale currently. And Ethel was, I suppose, a figure in the Russian emigre circles in the late part of the 1930 part of the 20th century. And as I say, she wrote a very famous novel called The Gadfly. And there is actually film footage available on the internet of Ethel being interviewed in the late 1950s after the Russian government made a copyright payment to her on the sales of her book, which is, I suppose, quite a remarkable thing. And then at the end, we have Margaret. Margaret married Edward Ingram Taylor, and their son was Geoffrey Ingram Taylor, who I'm sure some of you will know. So each of the daughters were very illustrious, very important figures in their own right. And I should say, the University in Cork continues to have very good connections with all of the different parts of the Boole family. About 120 of them came to Cork for our celebrations in 2015, and we're still in contact with them about the projects that we conduct and that we're currently engaged in using the Boole papers. So the last document that I'm going to show is actually quite a remarkable document. It's not written by Boole himself. It's actually written by probably his best friend. His best friend was a gentleman called Joseph Hill, who spent his younger days with Boole as a classmate. So they were very close, and they stayed friendly all through Boole's life, as far as we know. And after Boole died in 1864, Mary wrote out to all of his friends, asking them to write to her with their reminiscences of George, so that she could begin the process of writing the biography. And Joseph Hill wrote a very, very long letter, and a portion of it here that I'm going to show you and show you. And it's basically an account of the meeting between Boole and Charles Babbage at the Great Exhibition of 1862. And the two men obviously met, and I'll just quote directly from it. As Boole had discovered that means of reasoning might be conducted by a mathematical process, and Babbage had invented a machine for the performance of mathematical work, the two great men together seem to have taken steps towards the construction of that grand prodigy, a thinking machine. So if you can imagine, this is a letter written in 1866, describing a meeting between Babbage and Boole in 1862, talking about a thinking machine, which I think is quite remarkable. And when we show this to visitors, it really does make the hairs on their neck spike up, and it's a really important document in our collection. So where does that bring us? What are we doing nowadays with the Boole collection? So I'm just showing an image of myself with some colleagues in the Royal Society and some colleagues from the University of Lincoln. The Boole collection in University College Cork is the largest collection, the largest extant collection. And as I say, it's primarily his printed, his personal papers. We have a few printed books, including his own copy of an investigation of the laws of thought. But his academic papers are housed in the Royal Society in London. In the University of Lincoln and in Lincoln County Archives, they also have a small collection of papers relating to Boole, which was until quite recently in a personal collection, has now been handed over to the university and to the council. And up until a few years ago, the UCC collection was the only collection that was entirely listed. I'm now very glad to say that the 3 collections have been completely catalogued, and we're in the process of working together as a partnership, the 3 institutions, to present the Boole papers on an online platform in the near future for public consumption. We're also working to progress networking opportunities and seminars relating to the collections in the 3 institutions. So it's a very much a partnership project. And we met just before Christmas, and we've submitted funding applications for a few projects as well. So we're progressing that with a certain vigor, and hopefully it will, the project will bear fruit in the very near future. And I think that's my last slide.
Thank you. Thank you. This is super interesting. I mean, I had this great luck to be with you in Cork last year, and I saw the letters. Is there a possibility for, that's my question, and I will start with my questions, but I'm also telling the participants to write down their questions if they have some to you. My question is there a way to see in the internet or anyway these letters? Can I look them up somewhere?
Yes, you can. We have 2, I suppose, 2 websites that give information on George Boole collections in UCC. So I've already mentioned the georgeboole.com, which gives a lot of information on our events, our conferences, the legacy interviews. But we also have a site, georgeboole.ie, which you will also find on the George Boole 200 website, which is basically a listing of the collection with images from the collection which people can view. Now, the only thing I would say, the site is a little bit clunky. We're in the process of upgrading it, and it's not entirely searchable. So it's a little bit frustrating, but it's a little bit old now. So we're working to upgrade it as soon as we can. But all of the content is essentially there.
Okay, great. My further question is, why did George Boole not have a formal academic education? Why? Because of his parents, or?
It's a very good question. I think the reason is probably because the necessity to make money for the family. Also, obviously, their background, they came from a very poor background. So his father was a shoemaker, essentially a cobbler, and his mother was a housemaid. So they were coming from, at the best, I suppose, an artisan class. And the opportunity to sort of step into the academic environment, into the university environment, is really for those at the upper levels of society. And Lincoln, it's quite a bit away from the sort of central hubs of the urban centers in England. You know, it's a little bit out on a limb, so it's not an easy traveling between Lincoln and London and these sort of places. So I think that is one aspect. I also think that despite his brilliance, he had to make money to keep his family in sustenance. His father, although he had his business as a cobbler, seemed to have had some problems, where they were maybe lifestyle problems, or his business failed when Boole was quite young. He really had to take on the mantle of earning an income. And Boole was already at that stage teaching in the local schools and in the local mechanics institute and being paid for it. So there was a means of income there. So I think that's part of the reason.
So it makes it even more impressive. So he even worked, no? Made money in different.
Absolutely. And that's the interesting thing between the dilemma of coming to Ireland. You know, he obviously wanted to make his career as an academic, but that sort of the opportunity to do that, his vocational opportunity to do that, is conflicted with the need that he has to provide for the rest of his family. And like, he continued to provide for his family for most of his career, as far as we are aware.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Here, now I give over to the audience, to the participants. Questions are coming in. Thank you. I will start with the first question. One moment. And it's from Maria Manon. Hi, Maria. She says, truly interesting. Thank you very much, Cronan. Are there some articles, books about Boole's daughters and science?
Well, there's a very good book by a colleague of ours, Professor Des McHale, on George Boole, which essentially is the biography of Boole, and it covers quite a bit about his daughters and indeed his wife, Mary Everest. So that would be the first place that I would go. I also have a colleague in history. The name escapes me immediately, but I can circulate, or I can provide information on some of the texts that UCC people have produced on Boole, and there is a number of articles on Ethel Voynich as well, because of her connections with the Russian Emigre Society and her political activism. She was a very I suppose she was involved in revolutionary type politics, so a very interesting character. I think that's about as much information as I have just to hand at the moment on each of the daughters. But there are things written about them, but they're not as well known as they should be. And I suppose one of the things that we try to do at UCC is try and promote the daughters as much as George.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And now I read the question from Demi Verbeke. Demi Verbeke. Hi.
Oh, yeah.
Does Cork also hold the archives of particular students of Boole? Are there plans to continue this project by also including a focus on his students? That's a question.
Okay, so this is very interesting. We haven't, I suppose, when we started doing work on the collection in earnest about maybe 12, 13 years ago, there wasn't a massive interest in Boole. Outside of a few UCC academics and a few, I suppose, specialists, there wasn't really a wider awareness of Boole. So one of the things that we have attempted to do in 2015 was to bring Boole to and familiarity with Boole the man to a wider audience. We even, I think, we had our own Google Doodle on George Boole Day, I think, back in 2015. So the awareness of Boole is not that great, or was not that great, and sort of following from that, his students are perhaps not so well known. One thing that we do try to do, though, is there's a very clear line of academic interest in the sciences and in computing and in mathematics through his family tree. And we've done a lot of work on that over the last number of years and made connections there with the family. And I think that's very, very important. In terms of students today, what I would say is we have a beautiful bust of George Boole in the main quad on campus in UCC, which is the focal point of almost all of the university tours that are conducted by the visitor center on campus. And almost all of the school kids that visit UCC are introduced to George Boole either through the bus or through some other part of the tour program. So they're aware of Boole at a very early age. And there has been really incredible programs in the classrooms in the Cork region and throughout Ireland connecting Boole and introducing computing and science and mathematics to a younger generation. So I suppose the focus is very much on the current generation, with an eye to obviously encouraging students to come to UCC and to avail of our teaching and learning and research resources, and also connecting our students, our undergraduates and postgraduates, with the business community in the region, which I think is also exceptionally important. And those graduates have, I suppose, in recent generations have, as I've already said, gone out across the world, and some of them are coming back with their own businesses and connected to larger multinationals, and that's a very important network for us.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I had the great chance to be with Barry. Barry is our partner from UCC. Barry Sullivan is a professor, and he even said that in his studies, in his PhD work, he mentioned the letters of George Boole. So that's why he was like, you have to meet Cronin. So I had this great luck to meet you, but basically, it seems to be in the blood of your students and your professors, and in teaching, it's in their work. So here comes a shameless bit of advertising from Maureen Fitzgerald. She makes, reading it, a shameless bit of advertising. Cork University Press has 2 books about George Boole: The Life and Times of George Boole, and the other book, The Booles and the Hintons. So that's her. And I have a question from Alessandro, who's another partner from AI4U, also a colleague from Barry and me. From what you could gather, how did Boole balance teaching, researching, and external services, if any? Was he doing all the 3 types of activities? There was any tension among the 3? That's his question. Read again.
I suppose I begin by saying I won't have a complete answer for this question. Simply, the Boole papers are not complete enough to give a complete picture of Boole's life in Cork, particularly towards the latter part of his career. But I suppose one thing that I would say is he clearly was a very intense and driven person, and very dedicated. And even as a young man, his commitment to teaching was incredible. So before he comes to Cork, he's actually managing his own boarding school, as well as teaching outside of the boarding school. He's giving free classes to people who can't afford to attend the boarding school or other paid for classes in the Lincoln area. So he sees education as a real opportunity for people to make good of themselves and to make their circumstances better. And that goes through his entire career. So I suppose people will know that maybe that Boole died at quite an early age. He died at the age of 49. So the story of his death is a little tragic, in the sense that he actually walked through the rain from his residence in Black Rock, which is about maybe 3 miles west of the campus, to the university to teach. And he taught for most of the day in wet clothes, and then went back home. By the time he got home, he was in the midst of a fever, and he died a number of days later. So I suppose his commitment there to teaching is clear. He paid for it with his life. In terms of research, we know that he did travel a little bit, and obviously it's difficult from this distance to be 100% sure, but I suppose as a librarian and someone who looks at collections, you can be quite surprised with the networks that people have been able to maintain in the non-digital age. We take our networks sort of very seriously in the digital world, but the networks of correspondence through snail mail and through other sort of even through transport were probably a little bit more extensive than we maybe appreciate from this distance. So he seems to have maintained lots of connections with lots of people in the UK, and corresponded quite regularly with a number of important academics. There are Boole letters, different small collections of them in collections throughout the UK, and I think that's a feature of that. And in terms of research, I'm not 100% sure, but obviously he's making connections with people like Babbage. There's not an awful lot of documentation about the connections that he's making, but he is making some connections. There's some people in Ireland who are, you would think that he would be in contact with, but there's very little evidence extant. And in terms of the external pressures, I think as life in Cork progressed, I have a suspicion that if he had lived a little longer, he might have tried to move back to England. I just have a suspicion of that. I think life in the university maybe wasn't changing quickly enough for him. Maybe opportunity wasn't just as immediately there, and he maybe was feeling that he had to maybe move. And also, I think his health wasn't 100%. His health was starting to sort of trouble him a little, and there are references both from his wife and some evidence in the correspondence of that as well.
Okay, thank you. Wow, intensive answers. Here comes Juan Antonio Lore Egia. Sorry when I say the name wrong. Good afternoon. This is great work which you are presenting today, full of historical data and very beautiful and rigorous. My name, as we heard, is Juan Antonio Lore from Spain, member of the European Alliance for Artificial Intelligence. Thank you very much, and many thanks. One question, please. Is it possible to have a copy of this recording about George Boole to contribute to the dissemination of this mathematician and father of electronics too? I can answer. Yes, there is a recording, no?
Yes.
And Cronan, you will be seeing it first, and as soon Cronan says, yes, it's okay, then we publish it on the AI for You YouTube channel. Just put in AI for EU Cafe YouTube, you find it. Just put in AI for You, it will be there, or it will be just write an email if you feel like to us, to me, and anybody. This is not only for one, but for you all. Whoever wants to ask more questions to Cronan, send either directly to Cronan or to me an email. If you want to have a recording or maybe something else, please. This is the idea of this cafe, that we meet each other, that we connect, and that after this live session, this communication can continue. Here comes one more from Lorna Moloney. Very enjoyable, 1 point, not the first winner of the medal. For his paper on astronomical refractions published in the Philosophical Transactions for the year 1823, and his other valuable papers on mathematical subjects, George won in 1844. Lorna Moloney, George Boole, 200 genealogist. James Ivory won it in 1826. So we are learning. I think this is not a question. I think this is the winner of the medal. No? This is information just. Thank you, Lorna. And here comes Peter van der Len, Cronan, for your presentation. Does the collection also include the letters received by George Boole? For instance, we know what the sister responded to George's question, which job he should be pursuing. Do we have these letters?
Unfortunately not. Most of the letters are from George to his sister Mary Ann, or they are copies of letters that he wrote to other members of the family. So it's primarily the correspondence between George and Mary Ann. So we don't get letters back from other academics, unfortunately. But there is collections. I would say the Royal Society collection is very, very important collection, very worthwhile looking at it. I should have actually said a little bit about the manuscript copy of an investigation of the laws of thought. It kind of just slipped my mind, but Boole was a very religious man, and obviously, Boolean logic is very black and white. It's 1 or a 0, and a lot of Boole's thinking derives from his religious beliefs, I think. And I'm not an expert, but I just get a sense of that. And in the Royal Society collections, as well as having the original manuscript of the Laws of Thought, there is another manuscript where Boole writes almost a religious version of the same text, and it's written for the everyman. And there's lots of very sort of, I suppose, a little peculiar, it's a little of a peculiar text, but there's lots of very interesting insights there, I think, into his way of thinking and the way in which he thinks about logic and creation and all of these things that are sort of entwined with the new digital world that we're in. So I think it's a very interesting thing. So I would encourage people to look at the collections in the Royal Society and in Lincoln, as well as thinking of the collections in Cork. And as I say, hopefully we'll be able to bring all of the collections together into one space where people can view and access them and use them in one place.
Okay, thank you. We're coming now early enough to the end of our live session. Again, we also have Juan and says many things, and Jose, Mario, Maria, Lazaro, very interesting presentation, gives compliments. I give the last question because it's really the last. Which scholars, coming from Jose, Maria, Lazaro, which scholars elsewhere did have more connection with at that time? Do you know that?
Sorry, I didn't quite hear you there, Carmen.
Which scholars elsewhere, which other scholars did he have connection with?
I suppose the most important one was Augustus de Morgan. And Augustus de Morgan would have been one of his mentors in the early part of his career. And one of the testimonials in the little book that I showed an image of was from Augustus de Morgan. And de Morgan was, I suppose, a constant figure through all of his career. His later papers were kind of, I suppose, overseen. The deposit of those was overseen in the Royal Society by Augustus de Morgan. There was another chap as well, Duncan Gregory, who was involved with the Cambridge Mathematical Journal, who I think was very, very important to Boole before he made a name for himself as an academic. So 2 figures there that I think are particularly important to Boole.
Okay, thank you. So thank you again, Ronan. This was a great session, and I encourage the participants to send an email if you need more information. I now, it's 2 minutes to go. I just want to say, please come back next week to the cafe. The next live cafe session will be on Wednesday again at 3 p.m. at the same time like today. This time we have Spain. Ruben Cano from Baker McKenzie from Madrid. His title will be The Boundaries and AI, Overview of the Ecosystem. So this time we have a legal expert. So we're making the whole travel around AI. Thank you again, Ronan, and have a nice day. Greet Cork for me, no? Greet Ireland.
Indeed.
Keep safe, and everybody please keep safe and healthy. And see you next week. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.